1 in 5 suffer.
Erase the stigma.
Brain difference is not a crime.
Mental health isn't just your problem.
It's our problem.
And now, Mental Health Mondays with Marla and Dave.
Welcome to Mental Health Mondays.
We're Marla and Dave.
Yes.
Let me speak for myself. I'm Marla.
And I'm Dave, and we're shocked. We can't believe that Marla's actually in studio with us. Marla, you've been down in Florida for what seems like forever. Welcome back.
Thank you, Dave. That's another show. We can have a whole nother show on my Florida expedition.
We want to remind you guys to text the word GIVE, G-I-V-E, to 818-698-1021 and support our A Dollar Today Keeps the Stigma Away campaign.
So today, Dave, we have Tim Ashby with us, but what's our theme?
The theme for today is just surviving myself, and we'll have to ask Tim Ashby exactly what that really means. Tim is a playwright who left college with his typewriter in search of fortune and glory, sort of a literary Indiana Jones, one of my favorite movies, franchises, by the way. Like many others along the way, issues with mental health surfaced, and he was forced to deal with it. When we come back, we will hear Tim Ashby's incredible story, and if you want to be inspired, I suggest you stay tuned. Be right back.
Dave and Marla get it together.
Mental Health Mondays with Marla and Dave and NAMI San Fernando Valley believe it doesn't take much to make life a little better for our neighbors, coworkers, friends, our family members, even our children who suffer with mental illness. When you support our A Dollar Today Keeps the Stigma Away campaign, you are doing your part to erase the stigma surrounding mental illness. For just $1 today, or $1 a day for 1 week, just $7, we can look forward to a future that does not include the unfortunate and uncomfortable stares, bullying, and the subsequent isolation that our loved ones who suffer with brain differences deal with. Text the word GIVE, that's G-I-V-E, to 818-698-1021 to donate. A Dollar Today Keeps the Stigma Away. Brought to you by Mental Health Mondays with Marla and Dave and NAMI San Fernando Valley.
As promised, we are back. And like Dave said, if you are looking for inspiration, today is the day. We're glad you stuck with us. As a matter of fact, thank you and welcome to everybody who's in the chat room. Dave.
Our guest is Tim Ashby. Tim, welcome to the show.
Hello, Marla and Dave. Thanks for having me.
Tim, you know what? You just became, it's not politically correct for me to say our favorite guest, but for you to properly come in with a Marla first and then a Marla and Dave, Marla first, I'm just having a little moment of me. That's all.
Tim, you're racking up brownie points already.
Get it, brownie points. Bring.
Tim, I hope you didn't mind me actually taking sort of a literary license and comparing your story with leaving with just the typewriter almost to a literary Indiana Jones, which is one of my favorite franchises, like I said in the intro. But why don't you take us back to the beginning and sort of what happened before you left with that typewriter? What was life like before then?
Before I left with that typewriter, I was in high school, drinking heavily, a lot of drugs and alcohol, not really participating in school too much. And then a Radcliffe hippie, a woman came and became an English teacher there. And I was writing some stuff and she liked the writing, and that was pretty much the beginning. And so an aunt and uncle kind of rescued me from, just kind of being a dilettante, and asked me to come to Houston to live with them for a year. And my aunt was an English professor, and she turned me on to some great writers. And from there, I went to, I was in college for a couple of years, and then I just decided I'm not a college student. I'm just going to hit the road. So I loaded up my Rambler with my typewriter, went to Los Angeles, Seattle,
Now, I think when I was reading a little bit of your backstory, that typewriter was you were pretty specific about the actual type of typewriter.
We just lost, by the way, half our audience. They don't even know what typewriters are. I just want to throw that out there in case you guys want to keep talking about it.
Well, for those of you who don't know, once the abacus, no, I'm just joking.
There was Horse, there was Buggy, the abacus, and then the typewriter.
It was the Hermes 3000.
Hermes 3000. get it.
And you know what, Tim? I took just a little side note. I took typing in high school as a class. I was quite the typist.
Yes. Well, that was one other class in high school that I actually learned how to type.
Wow.
Which saved me. But from there, just writing really obsessively and stuff. Kind of, I was on the wagon for about 3.5 years, thanks to that aunt and uncle, and then tried alcohol again. Thinking, oh well. So it's really hard to tease out mental illness from ravages of drugs and alcohol.
Yeah, addiction. That's true.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because nowadays we refer to it as a substance abuse disorder.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So what comes first, the chicken or the egg?
And I think when maybe you are an alcoholic. When I was in about 8th grade, I got drunk for the first time, and how middle schoolers have social anxiety.
Yeah.
There's bullying and there's everything. When I got drunk for the first time, that was it. I just thought, this is the answer, and it was.
Wow.
It did solve the problem.
Wow.
It just created its own.
Right.
Suddenly
Right.
you're very popular. You're not afraid of anything. You're out there adventurous and bold, and then all of a sudden it turns on you.
Yeah, so now, is it like, how you hear these stories about artists who are dealing with drugs and alcohol, and they feel like drugs and alcohol allow them to access places mentally, I guess in their subconscious, that they don't usually tend to access. At least that's how
a lot give
how
credit.
they try to frame it. Was it the same thing for you, or is that just total BS?
Well, a lot of the writers I like, are alcoholic and stuff. And I think one thing is, when I used to write all day and then turn to the bottle in the evening, it was just like putting my brain in a bath. You're intellectual all day long, and then it's just suddenly you're sensual. So that's a big thing. The closest thing for me with drugs and alcohol actually impacting kind of my outlook on life or something was almost a willful attempt at, crazily enough, my aspiration was really just utter meaninglessness. And I achieved that. And probably that's the thing I carried away. Surviving that is probably the biggest ingredient of any inkwell that I have writing. I don't recommend it, but I probably wouldn't be the writer I am.
Right.
Wow.
Well, that was your path. All those things, I think, are contributors. They're not things that we promote at all, but the reality is, for sure, but that is your path. And so all of these things that, the story that you're able to sit and talk to us about today, it's just, part of your journey of discovery of you.
Yes. And that is making probably some lemonade out of lemons, in the sense that it probably I could have become the writer I am, avoiding that, not taking that detour.
Sure.
Things might have been more effective. If you think of like Fitzgerald or Faulkner, what they could have done without the alcohol.
Well, you know what? I'm a musician. I'm an artist as well, from a musical perspective. And, like many high schoolers, like you described, experimented with drugs and alcohol. But what I started to realize is that while drugs and alcohol at the very beginning seem to allow you to test the limitations that you sort of put on yourself, after a while, the type of music, because I'm in a jazz vocal group, and the type of music that we were doing, I was just basically, there's no possible way in any level of inebriation that you can do what we do. It's just that technical. So the dexterity was just out the window, and because of that, it was like, okay, no, I'm done. So, would it be almost a similar thing that you're kind of describing now, that balance, that after a while, once you get to a certain level, it's really more trouble than it is help?
Oh yeah. I mean, first of all, it just becomes everything, just the same way that at first you become so sensual and you can actually experience the moment instead of being locked in your head because you're on drugs and alcohol. When it turns on you, it becomes just the opposite. It's like the closing of a lid of a coffin. I used to be obliterated, late at night and just feeling incredibly claustrophobic. And it would literally take me outside. I would have to go outside as if I would explode if I didn't get out and get some air, and I could never escape it. It was like being in the skin of a disease I couldn't get out of, and yet I couldn't quit.
Yeah.
I found myself going into liquor stores against my will, pulling into the lot against my will, and that's when I had the sense to get into rehab.
So I was gonna say, so let's get, so we left your actual physical journey in your Rambler, and
yes.
you're right, and so at that point,
somewhere in this cycle, you got married, had a family, started a family.
Yes, but before that, on and off the wagon and stuff, ended up getting married on the wagon, straight and everything. And then again, that thing, like, I think I can handle it now. I think I can handle it. I even told my wife at one point, I've been on the wagon the whole time. She was aware of my past and everything. And at some point I said, I know I'm an alcoholic, but I think the benefits outweigh the negativity.
Wow. And what was her perspective on that statement?
Did she go get a helmet and put on a hard hat and just sit in the corner like, okay, here we come?
Her perspective was, I don't think the marriage will.
Wow.
I don't think the marriage will survive it, but I did it anyway. And then, everything happened almost by the book, estranged, ended up in a hotel room by myself, just, contemplating death. And then, luckily I had contact with a great psychologist who had seen me through barbiturate withdrawal and, basically a psychotic break during that time, 2 months of a continuous panic attack.
Now, would you describe withdrawal from barbiturate as something that is symptomatically extremely different from withdrawal from any other drug or alcohol or anything like that?
Yes, because it can be your death.
Wow.
It's even more severe, I believe, in that sense than heroin, in the sense that your body, I think the PDR puts it at about 400 mgs a day for 3 or 4 months. And I was doing, a gram or two of 100 milligram secanols, every day or so. It'd go up and down, but it was a huge amount. And I got stoned one time, smoked a joint with some people, and it just woke me. I thought, I'm going to die. I don't know. It's just a different perspective on it. And I quit cold turkey, which was insane. I mean, it was physically dangerous. And
well, Tim, hold on right there, because we're coming to the end of this segment. I can tell the story's about to get juicy. So, especially I want to actually touch on the fact that of this great therapist that you hooked up with, which seemed completely out of the box as far as I'm concerned when I read about it. And we'll catch back up on the rest of your story as soon as you come back from this break. Don't move.
All righty.
Thank you.
It's time for the Mental Health Minute with Marla and Dave.
What is an anxiety disorder? Well, it's a chronic condition characterized by an excessive and persistent sense of apprehension, with physical symptoms such as sweating, palpitations, and feelings of stress.
People with anxiety disorders respond to certain objects or situations with fear and dread. According to mentalhealth.gov, an anxiety disorder is diagnosed if a person has an inappropriate response to a situation, cannot control the response, or has an altered way of life due to the anxiety.
The 5 major types of anxiety disorders are generalized anxiety disorder, obsessive compulsive disorder or OCD, we've all heard of that one, panic disorder, post-traumatic stress disorder, we've heard of that one as well, but there's also social phobia or social anxiety disorder.
If you or anyone that you know shows serious signs of anxiety, please contact a mental health professional to get much needed help.
This message is brought to you by Mental Health Mondays with Marla and Dave.
I never do anything without thinking about it first.
Marla is a feeler.
I basically live my personality on my sleeve.
But when Marla and Dave get together, it's like a match dancing with a firecracker.
All right, Tim.
Go ahead.
We left off this story as it was really just starting to heat up. You were telling us about all the barbiturates that you were dealing
Yeah,
with.
he went cold turkey.
Now, as a matter of fact, I actually thought I had heard a while ago that alcohol was also a very dangerous drug to withdraw from, and people don't really realize that because it's a physical withdrawal, and you're sounding like you're
Seizures.
describing the same type of thing with barbiturates.
Yeah, with alcohol, I think there's some percentage of people who have DTs and
Yeah,
physiological
exactly.
withdrawal. Somehow, a plus on my alcoholism was that my life blew up so fast after any given time of going off the wagon that it really did come to that point: either euthanize yourself or keep drink.
Wow.
Keep drink. It was a mess. So I couldn't drink for over 6 or 7 months without coming to that fork in the road.
Yeah.
Either live or sober up.
Yeah, the crossroads came quick.
Barbiturates, when I quit those, it was a whole other thing. It was like being turned inside out. I couldn't, it was literally like in the bed, trembling, teeth chattering for days, until finally I just looked up in the yellow page as a doctor. This was in Albuquerque, and she saw me, and, she didn't suggest, the withdrawals were just horrible, but we didn't do benzodiazepine or anything. She just said, walk through it. In my case, I think at that point I wasn't in any physical danger. And she said, we're just going to look it in the eye and you're going to walk through it. And, by doing that, by grappling with it, I was able just to put it down, over time. I just put it down. I was afraid I would faint at work. I just got this job with Social Security, doing data entry work, all this anxiety, coming out. I was probably not very productive, but I survived that.
Now, one of the things that kind of struck me is the sense that I got of this wonderful therapist, and we say wonderful because it was effective. That's the first and foremost.
Yes.
Indicator of a great therapist, but it seemed like
unconventional.
That it was a little unconventional because it seemed pretty aggressive to where the more empathetic feeling type of therapy that I run into these days. It seemed like the way you were describing this therapist was much more aggressive.
What are we missing, Tim? Help us.
Am I mischaracterizing that in any way?
Sharon, this particular doctor, was more than empathetic. I mean, she was just an incredible doctor. When I was in rehab, because I was still, suicidal, I didn't really know how to put my life back together. I thought, I don't know if I can, what I'm going to be after rehab, if there's even any reason to go on. They sent me to an off-site psychiatrist who was very aggressive and deconstructed me very handily and quickly. And I think what he saw was somebody who was lost in his own theatrics about being the drug-addled alcoholic writer, romanticizing writing in that way, the troubled artist who can't. That's what he let me have, and he let me have it hard. He said, I don't have time for it. You don't have time for it. Get your shit together. Wow. And so when I walked out of that office, it did it because I'd always had compunction. The reason Sharon worked as a psychologist, the reason another psychologist worked in Los Angeles later, was because I always deep down had the compunction that was there, even at my drunkenness, when I would sober up and that terror of losing my life was there was something in me that wanted to survive, and I would be very hard on myself too.
Wow. So now, and that's kind of what I'm saying. So would you say that therapist sort of had that intuition that was kind of buried in you all along and just kind of was speaking to,
or was that a therapy
that part of your psyche
strategy,
or was that just a part of like Marla's saying, his normal strategy, or was that something specific for you?
I would say it was something very specific.
Wow.
Seeing me, hearing the bullshit that I was running on people in the rehab facility, and stuff like that. And it's not like Sharon, before that, having spent a few years in therapy with her, wasn't aware of that theatrical side of it,
right?
Which is a whole other element that runs parallel to it all, where there was always some part of me outside myself thinking this will be good for writing somehow, this
wow.
this trauma, this self-imposed, kind of suicidal living or something is naturally profound, and that's what I can use.
Yeah, it's sort of Dickens-esque. It's required.
And that comes from somebody who's always had, pretty much everything. I was never on the street. I always had resources. My parents were kind. It's almost, trying to make something out of nothing.
It's like creative stress.
Yeah.
Yes. But underlying all that, I believe, was real emotional distress on some level, anxiety, social anxiety, an overarching fear of my own mortality, ironically enough, as I, nosedived. I think that was always there. And it's something that I still, even sober, I have to get through,
Yeah.
So now, go ahead, Marla. I'm sorry.
I was just going to ask, Tim, was with the professionals that were treating you, were you ever given a diagnosis, or were they just treating you for the symptoms that you were dealing with that you presented and brought forward?
Well, I was diagnosed by Sharon as an anxiety neurotic. I don't know if that was just, you got to put a label on some
Right.
Yeah.
purposes, I'm not sure about that. I think that's the only diagnosis I got. Probably the rehab has some.
Right.
This was years ago. So I don't know.
I always ask those questions because, to be honest, when people are the diagnosis for us is of no matter other than just an identification of an issue. But I ask that because people who listen to our show they literally look at our guests and they relate. It's like, oh my goodness, that's exactly what I'm going through. And they, I think that I used to say, it's the can and the worms theory for me. Most of us don't understand what is this can. You open it up and then you're like, oh, they're worms. And it's like, oh my God, what do I do with these worms? So identifying an issue is one thing, and then managing it is another. And
we always remind everyone, our guests and our listeners, that the diagnosis is really there for a treatment perspective. Right. If medication is required, then you got to know what you're prescribing this medication for. But other than that, to help someone actually work through their issues is the main feature of all therapy. And therapeutic approaches when it comes to mental illness, mental health, mental wellness, and when it comes to rehab as well. So before we run out of time for this segment, Tim, please now work us back into keeping these things in perspective with the substance issues, maybe the mental health issues on board. And how does that actually then get back to getting your family back together and getting your relationship back and actually getting to this wonderful place where you are now? And we're about to run out of time. So I'll let you actually get to that when we come back from this next break. Our guest is a playwright, Tim Ashby, and we are honored to have him. We'll be right back. All right.
Go, Dave.
Marla is back in studio, and she's actually got a little shoulder shimmy. Is that the pole dance? That's the best we can get for today? There you go.
It's kind of, Tim, you don't even know how limited I am in this seat. It's not right.
Marla's pole dancing.
They say dance, girl, dance, but sit down. What are you doing?
Marla's pole dancing lets us know it's poll time. Time for the poll question. Marla, what was the poll question that we asked ourselves last week?
David, I think what we were discussing amongst ourselves sounded very much like this. With the rise in U.S. adults with anxiety and depressive disorder, it now rivals the prevalence of what other chronic health issue? A, obesity, B, heart disease, or C, cancer?
Yes, and I'm pretty sure we didn't say what the answer was last week because
we should ask him.
First of all, you got to actually tune in the next week to get last week's poll question answered. But Tim, what do you think the answer is? With the rise in U.S. adults with anxiety and depressive disorder, it now rivals the prevalence of what other chronic health issue? Obesity, heart disease, or cancer?
I will say heart disease.
Well, Tim, good thing you're a successful playwright.
You are amazing at plays. You are amazing as you're doing a great job.
Because the answer is obesity.
Tim, don't let this mess with your self-esteem, though. You are a great playwright. You are amazing.
Yeah.
Well, Tim, we have another chance for you. This is a new question. What is the number of U.S. adults living with PTSD? 5 million, 12 million, or 18 million?
I'm going to go 18.
Okay, now Tim, you can go where you want, but you'll have to come back here next week to find out whether you have landed this or not. And for the rest of you who are watching, remember, we always love to get your opinion, your voices. We love for them to be heard. Go to our social medias. Please cast your vote on the poll question. You know where to find us.
We'll be right back. All right, Tim.
So Tim, we were talking about we're landing the Tim plane of how you be able to cohesively get a hold of your issues and bring your life to where it is now.
All right. Number 1, sobriety. Number 2, the people in my life. So I was separated for a year when I was drinking. You know, I somehow managed to get my wife back. She trusted me, and a couple years later trusted me to even have kids. I knew when I was in rehab, I wasn't going to be one of these people who, you know, went to rehab every year just as some, you know, drama thing or something. I knew that it had to take that time for me, and it did. You know, it's been like 31 years since I've been
Wow, congratulations.
And then you know, other than that, you know, the sobriety, I think it was discovering how positive writing could be in my life and creating something. And, you know, I've always written and got involved in theater, and, you know, I just love that. And also finding, instead of being such a hard person on myself, having some compassion, some tolerance for when I'm not fitting in the boundaries that I think are appropriate and stuff, to have a little bit of compassion along with that compunction I was talking about, to be able to forgive myself, forgive other people. And, you know, I think that's an important thing. And just that mental illness is not, you know, a very good looking thing, you know, to other people or to us, but to always keep discreet ourselves from that mental illness, that it's something that's on your back that you have to deal with, but it's not who you are. And, you know, other people can be particularly hard, you know, looking at somebody who's not behaving appropriately. I mean, oftentimes mental illness can be a very ugly thing to see. And we start, you know, holding on to that baggage ourselves. We start conflating that with ourselves and who we are, and start hating ourselves, which leads to drugs and alcohol. And it's just a horrible cycle to get into. So having compassion for yourself, you know, that's a very important thing.
Absolutely.
Well, Tim, that actually wraps it up very nicely. You know, we said at the beginning of the show that the theme for today was surviving yourself. But, you know, the way that you wrap that up to remind us that we are not our diagnosis, our diagnoses. And, you know, as with every other human being on this planet, we all have value. And we're not alone. Everyone goes through struggles. There's no need to kind of keep it hidden inside and think that I'm the only one who's dealing with something this heavy. Trust me, whatever you're dealing with, someone else is actually dealing with, if not something that equally as heavy, maybe even heavier. So, you know, that compassion for ourselves, as well as, you know, once we get there, then we can have compassion for others.
And I like the quiet message just in your story that isn't made. And, you know, you were given a gift. And so your creativity, was nothing that you do or have done in your journey was able to actually dampen or water down what you were gifted to do and be. And the rest of it is just the journey of figuring out, you know, how you can maximize Tim, and how you can do that responsibly. And that is, to me, the silent strength in your story and your personal journey that I will take away. That, you know, that these you know, turns and drops and things that we have, at no point did it redefine the road that you're actually meant to be on.
You know, as well as kudos to Mrs. Ashby. A lot of times, you know, we take for granted that we can go through these roller coasters of life, ups and downs and twists and turns. But to have somebody who's actually going to stick by our side as we go through these life changes, and to be that rock for us, is something that's also not just amazing, but necessary.
Yes, be grateful, Tim. I get car sick. I could have never taken that ride.
Yes.
No, so thank you so very much.
Absolutely.
You know what? One of the things that our mission here, when we started this, and you know, Dave and I used to do a variety talk show, and turned our full attention in 2019 to mental health, because it's so important for us to erase the stigma. It's super important because it's not like we say in the opening. Really, it's mental health is not your problem. It's actually our problem. There's no one I know. So I'm always just appreciative to have the shared story, and your journey is amazing, and we really appreciate you coming and sharing with us.
Well,
Absolutely.
thanks for having me.
Thank
Good
you.
job.
Thank you indeed. Hey, you guys, next week, our guest will be Casey Short. You definitely don't want to miss her story as well. And you know what? Like Marla said, the transparency that Tim has used and shared with his story is something that once you get to the other side, it's easy to do. So don't really keep things inside. Don't suffer in silence, as Marla likes to say from time to time.
Silence is not golden.
Because you are not alone. And we will see you guys next week. Thanks again, Tim.
Thank you, Tim.
Bye.
Bye-bye.